Good morning, everyone. Coming up at noon on Channel 9 News, John Gotti is back in the hands of the law today. We'll have a live report. The Joel Steinberg jury deliberates for a second day, and confessed killer Ted Bundy loses his last legal battle. Bundy was executed this morning in Florida. Also, angry motorists are out in protest. All that is coming up at noon. Join us. Right now, back to Richard, and People Are Talking. Richard?
Welcome back to People Are Talking. Father Lucas, want to give you a chance to finish your thought.
I think it's extremely important. If I make one point, I think it was illustrated here, why it's so important to know your origin, your culture, and your history. I hear folks saying that I want to be called simply American. What's wrong with that? It shows that they have no concept of history. Here you have, they want to be called by a name which was founded exclusively as a white society on the genocide of the Indians, whom one person claims she belongs to, and on the enslavement of African peoples, whom he says he belongs to. And then they get up and say, I want to be called American. That's just euphemism for I really want to be white.
Okay.
And I think that's hilarious.
In America, if a person whom we now call black came from Haiti or came from Jamaica and then immigrated to the United States, would we also call them African Americans?
Yes.
No, we call them...
Yes.
Mr. Greenaway?
They refer to themselves by their cultural heritage or legacy. For example, Caribbean Americans, whether they are from Jamaica or Trinidad, refer to themselves as West Indians or Caribbean Americans. Now, this term African American has the potential to be divisive to the extent that it allows a certain cultural concept, African American, to somehow exclude other black peoples from using and identifying their full cultural heritage.
Because, wait a second, in your mind, Mr. Greenaway, would somebody's cultural identification and heritage, if they came from the Caribbean, or they came from Jamaica, or they came from Cuba, would their identification with that island culture be as strong as their identification with the African culture?
Would be Haitian or Jamaican.
What we live and experience.
Their group identification would be African American.
Daily as individuals, as Americans, as black men, as Italian Americans, as Irish Americans, is the most dominant cultural experience that we have. African American is a way of culturally and historically identifying with Africa. And I say wonderful, that's good, but it is not a definitive cultural expression of our fullness. As black Americans, we see ourselves not only as Africans, but we see ourselves also as Americans with a tradition of equality, with a tradition of a common humanity, and with a tradition of individuality and uniqueness. That's what makes us all Americans. And America today is a mosaic of a lot of ethnic groups, and we must recognize that reality also.
Let me get to some audience people out here who are straining. Stand up, please. Yes.
Yeah, well, everybody gets upset. I don't know, it seems to me everybody gets upset when black people try to identify with their country. All right, you go on these job applications.
What is your country?
I know for a fact that my ancestors come from Africa.
Right.
My grandmother taught me that.
But what is your country?
Pictures.
Is that your
Africa?
Your country is America, isn't it?
This is where I live. But this is where I live.
Where you live?
But this isn't my country. This is my country. You're talking about today. When people go on vacation, they go back to Italy. They say the old country. When people go on vacation, if they Irish, they try to identify with their own country.
All right, yes, sir. Stand up, please, over here.
The way I feel, okay, prior to...
Is this your country, America?
This is my country, but I have... My ancestors came from Africa, okay? And anyone who is from the Caribbean, wherever black people are, okay, they originated from Africa, okay? Regardless of...
Actually, historically, as we know through archaeological research, all people came from Africa.
Right.
Because the first people came from Africa.
Okay, fine, but the issue is whether or not I have the option to call myself African American as opposed to someone else calling me something else. And this is not tending to be racist. I'm not trying to be racist here.
Okay.
All I'm doing is pointing out the fact that if an Italian person that is American, all right, wants to be called Italian, they can be called Italian American. On job applications, what they put down is black, white, Asian, whatever. Number one, they don't have human being as an option on a job application.
Wait, let me get... Bob Grant, you want to respond to that? He says on a job application, it asks you what race you are. So this whole idea
Unfortunately, they do in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is one of the most fraudulent pieces of legislation ever passed, says they're not supposed to do that. But white people don't put down white. You know what I am? And you too, Richard, we are now other. It'll say black, it'll say Hispanic, it'll say Aleut, whatever the heck that is. It'll say Native American. We are other, Richard. We have become other. That's not because of all this cockamamie.
Yes, stand up, please.
Most of the stuff he says on this program.
Who decides whether they're going to be called blacks or black African? Who decides that? Why shouldn't that be a black issue altogether?
Okay, this woman here says, Bob...
No, I don't waste time.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but I'm continuing the show over here. This woman in the audience over here says, this should primarily be a black issue. And it shouldn't be something that culturally we should discuss in a larger context because it should be an issue among blacks to decide whatever they want to be called.
And I agree.
Bob, you agree with that?
That's what we said. That's why we have
beginning of the show.
We said that's the beginning of the show.
Will you agree
Richard,
with that?
nobody noticed that at the beginning I said, if that's what they want to be called, it should be up to them. I mean, why don't people pay attention?
Okay, but listen to this. For years, people who were in the homosexual political movements wanted to be called gay activists or gay lifestyles or gay people. The New York Times for years resisted using that appellation. It took them years to get to the point where they would even print gay in the newspaper. Finally, they have. If that was we called the New York Times and said, what will it take for the New York Times to change the term used for black Americans to African Americans? And they got very secretive about this. You'd think that we were going into their secret files and they were saying, well, we're studying the culture and we're looking into this. We have no statement to make about this.
No.
Black and white, that it don't even make sense. People in this country, for one thing, should remember we're an American first. All of these damn applications don't even take time out to find out if you're an American.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think that we should be called African American, because we have to realize that we are African first. Because
you're African before you're American?
Yes, I am African. That's where my roots came from. Now, I am going back. I go back every year to Africa. Africa is the...
Well, let me ask you this then. Without using the sort of racist language like go back to Africa, if Africa is where you really feel so strongly attached, why don't you live in Africa?
Listen, I'm planning to live in Africa one day, but right now I'm here. I'm going to build my country here, and then I'm going to go to Africa.
Why?
Why? Because that's where my roots are.
But if Africa is so wonderful and you have your roots there and you're so attached, why don't you go there? If I found another country in the world where I felt more comfortable with the morals of that country, I would go live there.
Well, I plan on going back to live there.
Why didn't you leave?
I plan on going back.
Why didn't you leave?
I've got to take a break right now. We'll be right back in just a moment. Stay with us. You think we missed the boat on all this?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, I can hear a speech coming here.
I am known as Isaac Ship, but that's not my real name because I knew my grandfather. I am by America like I was about my kids. I say I'm with you right or wrong. If you're right, I'm with you. If you're wrong, I'm going to stay with you till I get you right.
How would we miss the boat?
But you missed the boat. All of these philosophical phrases about what you should be called. Whatever you call yourself, if you're from Italy, you're an Italian American. If you're from China, you're a Chinese American. If you're from Jamaica, you're a Jamaican American. If you're from Greek, you're a Greek American. They got all association out, but we all are Americans, and let's forget about this what you should be called, and I'm Afro-American.
Okay. We asked you at home. Should we call American blacks African Americans? You can continue voting. 201-480-VOTE. 47% of you say yes at this point. 53% of you say no at this point. Continue voting 1-201-480-VOTE. Yes, Mr. Greenaway.
The point I'm making is that the black consciousness revolution of the 60s and the black power movement of the 60s has reached a new phase. And it's certainly not the African-American phase. I call it the mutual obligation phase. What we have today is the reality that there are black people within the inner cities and throughout the cities of this nation making an attempt to do something about the problems that afflict them in the inner cities. We have groups...
But wait a second, what about the woman who wants to go back to Africa? And she
says...
That
is her option. She has an absolute right to do that. What I'm saying is that the term African-American does not address the concrete realities and problems that afflict the black community.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you not to speak because your microphone just fell off. If you can reattach it there, I'll continue the discussion. Yes, now what...
At the bottom of this whole thing is self-esteem. The major thing that has actually tormented Africans, what Du Bois called this dualness, is that their hatred, the imposed self-hatred, which lies at the root of all of the problems, unlike any other population group in this country. So the whole thing to reclaim, you know, one's identity is coming full cycle. And that's why, wait a minute, man, I listened to you. That's what's important, because you're talking about something, we're talking about something that we played a part in. We put the Black is Beautiful movement out here to make people understand that they had to appreciate their own Africanness.
But that was done, and now it's Africa. Africa is beautiful.
The point is that it all was destroyed.
Okay, let me ask Bob. You want to respond to this?
Yeah, Mr. Brandt used a term. I think I heard him right. He said self-hatred. Now maybe that's something we whites and non-blacks, maybe that's something we don't really appreciate and understand. Maybe he knows something we don't know. He used the term self-hatred. I hear black citizens use that phrase many times. May I ask him a question?
People use
Go
it
ahead.
too.
Do you hate yourself?
Not me. We initiated the Black is Beautiful movement in 1961.
What do you think most blacks hate themselves?
I said that most black people in this society, the majority of black people, to become an American, just as you had to change your name to become more Anglo for acceptance, many black people try to even be like white people. And that's the reason why a hair straightening industry was built. You know, a woman became a millionaire. And they wanted to be like white because the norm in this society is that all the criteria are white.
All right, Bob, what's your point?
So that's a given.
Well,
that's what American means to some people.
Bob, your point in this?
Well, I think he's talking about cosmetics, really, now.
We're not talking about cosmetics. We're talking about self-esteem.
We're talking about how a person feels within himself. And if black people, by and large, according to him, hate themselves, they have to ask why they hate themselves.
Because white people, as part of the slave-breaking process...
Hey, has anybody here ever been a slave? These guys keep talking about slavery.
This day,
okay.
January the 24th. Wait a minute, hold on a second, Richard.
Wait a second. You just had a very long time speaking, Alambe. Hold on for 1 second here.
You had roots.
Bob, what's your point about slavery here?
I showed you that.
I can't hear you.
What is your point that you're making about slavery?
Well, they keep talking about slavery. They even said something to you about slavery. I have never owned a slave, and nobody up here has ever been a slave. But you benefit.
Okay.
You see, that's so
I'm sorry. We have to take a break right now. We'll be right back with the final results of the People poll and a wrap-up. Stay with us. Welcome back to People Are Talking. Should black Americans be called African Americans? That's our question for today. It's been proposed by Jesse Jackson. This is how you're responding. 45% of you say yes, 55% of you say no. I have a telephone call right now. Good morning, you're on the air. Speak out.
Hello?
Yes.
I would just like to say that I don't think black people should be called African Americans because not all black people are black. Some people have a mixture in their family. Some people are black and some people are mixed with white. What should they be called? Black, white,
But we do call them all black Americans at this point, so that's not actually true to the point as well, right?
So
Okay, I have questions out here in the audience. Yes.
Moot point.
I don't think it should matter what you call each other. If you live in America, you're an American. And like you said, when you cut yourself open, you still have the same blood.
Okay.
Richard,
that's not Richard. There's a question back here in the audience. Stand up, please. Go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say, I think we should look through the eyes of teaching our children. My daughter Clover has met a lot of black Americans, and she said one thing. She's 7 years old.
You can stand up straight.
Okay.
Go ahead.
She said, gee, Mommy, a lot of them, they're not really black, they're brown. They should be called brown people. That's just a concept of a 7-year-old. And another thing, I hope that we can all get into the consciousness that we're soul, because I raised my daughter to think of that level of consciousness. Soul has no color. And if we can just maintain that unity as all Americans, we'll get along a lot better.
A new age mommy. Bob?
Before time runs out, we talk about the name change, and now everybody's black, and maybe everybody will be African. How come the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, never changed its name? How come the United Negro College Fund never changed its name? How come?
Okay. Father Lucas, quickly, you want to address that?
No, I got a more important point to make.
If you can do it very
that,
quickly, I'm running out of
the
time.
answer to that.
I don't want to cut you off, but you have 30 seconds.
You see, when you talk about, the thing is, we're not talking about cosmetics, we're not talking about color, we're talking about a land, we're talking about a history, we're talking about culture. When people get up and say that why aren't we all Americans, I think that's the same kind of cop-out that we have. No, when Elambe spoke about self-hatred, you missed a very important point. He said imposed self-hatred. We have a lot of folks running around talking about, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a priest, I'm a quarterback who just happens to be Negro. What you have there, nobody came out of their mama's womb with a scalpel or a law book or a blue uniform
I gotta cut you off, Father Lucas. I asked you to be brief. We're going to news right now. We'll continue this discussion during the commercial break. You won't hear it, but all of us here will. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Richard. Coming up on Channel 9 News at noon, Judgment Day for a confessed killer. Ted Bundy finally is executed.
John Gotti is back in the hands of the law today. We'll have a live report.
We will also be live at the courthouse where the jury is deliberating Joel Steinberg's fate.
And motorists who say that they are fed up and just can't take it anymore, we're going to tell you why.
All that is coming up at noon. Join us.
If you would like information on any of the topics we discussed today, call our hotline number 201-330-3886.
This is our rapper over here. Did you hear him? Thanks for coming to the show, but it's time to go. It causes a great deal of sorrow to tell you that we have to tell you what's coming up tomorrow.
Tomorrow, spectacular singer Judy Collins is going to be here. We're going to teach you how to be your own psychic. You can read your own tea leaves. Won't that be good?
Then life after sports. Your favorite sports heroes are going to be here to talk about what their lives are like now that the crowds have stopped cheering. We have got Larry Holmes, former world heavyweight champ, Jerry Cooney, Joe Pepitone, Rusty Staub, and Dennis Potvin. Remember Potvin? You'll find out more what they said tomorrow, live at 10. Thank you for joining us today. Now we're going. Bye-bye. All our best.
Promotional considerations provided by the Meadowlands Hilton. Pastry for our studio audience provided by Spinkerman's Bakery with 4 locations to serve you. Transportation for some of the guests and people are talking provided by Quality Limousine Service, home of the 40-foot stretch.